Before we begin, I want to ask you something important. When you saw the title of this video, did your first reaction come from offense or from curiosity? Were you ready to tune out, or were you willing to lean in and listen? Because here's the truth, this conversation isn't meant to hurt anyone, but it is meant to challenge you. And sometimes a challenge is exactly what we need most. This isn't a personal attack. It's not a hit piece on women. It's a call to rise. A wake-up call to step out of habits and patterns that keep us stuck, not just as individuals, but as a culture. Now, let's be clear, this isn't just about women. The behaviors we'll talk about exist in men too, but today we're focusing on women, not because we want to shame anyone, but because we believe women deserve better than the lies society keeps telling them. We live in a time when empowerment has been twisted into entitlement, when accountability is mistaken for attack, when calling out unhealthy behavior is seen as anti-woman instead of what it truly is, a form of care. You see, true growth only happens when we're willing to get uncomfortable. Not everything that feels good is good for you, and not everything that stings is meant to hurt. It might be meant to heal. There are patterns of behavior that are more than just foolish, they are dangerous. Dangerous to your happiness, your future, your relationships, your inner peace. And when we pretend they're okay, when we label any honest feedback as toxic, we don't protect women, we hold them back. That's not empowerment, that's fear, and fear dressed up as feminism is still fear. So here's the real question. Are you brave enough to keep listening? Are you strong enough to sit with discomfort long enough to ask yourself, could any of this apply to me? Because that's where real transformation begins, not in pointing fingers. Not in defending yourself, but in being open to the idea that maybe, just maybe, there's something within you that's ready to evolve. This video is not about labeling women as stupid. That word is provocative, yes, but it's also purposeful. It's meant to stop you in your tracks. It's meant to get your attention. Because what we're talking about isn't stupidity in intelligence, it's in mindset. It's about the kind of thinking that keeps you small, stuck, and repeating the same mistakes. So if you're here to grow, if you're tired of surface-level self-help and ready for something deeper, then stay. Stay with the discomfort, stay with the honesty, stay with the challenge, because this isn't about tearing anyone down, it's about building something stronger in its place. Let's begin with the first sign, a habit so common, so easy to fall into, yet so destructive if left unchecked, the refusal to take responsibility. Let's start with something that might hit close to home. One of the clearest signs of a foolish mindset, one that quietly poisons your growth without you even realizing, is this: a deep, persistent refusal to take responsibility for your life. Think about it. When things go wrong, where does your mind go first? Do you point the finger? Do you say, it's my parents' fault, it's society, it's the trauma, it's the patriarchy, it's my ex, or it's the toxic energy around me? Now listen, this isn't about denying the reality of hardship. Bad things happen. Some of us come from broken homes, survive abuse, experience loss, or face injustice. That's real, that matters. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. You can't heal by blaming. You don't grow stronger by handing away your power. Because when blame becomes your default, you create an identity rooted in helplessness. And that's a dangerous place to live. You stop being the author of your life and start becoming a character in a story someone else is writing. This is how victimhood becomes seductive. It gives you a built-in excuse for everything. Failed relationship, they were toxic. Missed opportunity, someone held you back. Bad decision, it was because of your past. The world begins to revolve around what happened to you instead of what you're choosing to do now. But here's the twist: when you always cast yourself as the victim, you start attracting chaos. You'll find yourself surrounded by people who validate your drama because it lets them avoid their own. You'll sabotage healthy relationships because they don't fit your story of pain. And deep down, you'll feel it, that hollow, quiet shame that whispers you're not being honest with yourself. True growth begins the moment you say the most difficult words in the English language. This is my fault. That's not self-blame. That's power. That's ownership. That's the first step toward transformation. Let me ask you, how long have you been carrying a story that keeps you small? A story where everything bad in your life is someone else's doing. Because the longer you hold onto that narrative, the harder it is to change the ending. You don't have to be perfect. None of us are, but you do have to be responsible. Because when you refuse to take ownership, you don't just stay stuck, you start to decay. You age into bitterness, you lose respect, and most tragically, you lose the ability to love deeply, truly, because love requires accountability. So here's the challenge: stop blaming and start building. Take back your power by taking responsibility for where you are and where you want to go, because your past may not be your fault, but your future, that's entirely in your hands. Let's talk about one of the most subtle yet devastating patterns that keep people, especially women, stuck in lives they never intended to build, chasing short-term gratification. It starts small. A late night out when you promised yourself you'd rest. Scrolling for hours on social media instead of working on your goals. Saying yes to a relationship you know won't go anywhere just because you're tired of feeling alone. In the moment, it feels harmless. You might even say, I deserve this. But those little choices, they compound, they become a lifestyle. And one day you look up and realize the life you wanted never showed up. But the one you settled for, that's what you've been building all along. Now, let's be honest. It's easy to justify it. I just want to live in the moment. I'm still young. Everyone else is doing it. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. What feels good now can cost you everything later. There's nothing wrong with enjoyment. Life is meant to be lived, savored, even celebrated. But enjoyment without direction becomes sedation. It numbs you, it distracts you, and eventually it robs you of purpose. A woman who constantly chooses pleasure over purpose ends up stuck in cycles that look like freedom but feel like emptiness. She's always moving but going nowhere, always stimulated but never satisfied. Why? Because deep fulfillment doesn't come from chasing what's easy, it comes from doing what's meaningful. And meaningful takes time, it takes effort, it takes sacrifice. You won't build a career that matters by binge-watching Netflix every night. You won't develop emotional maturity by jumping from one temporary relationship to the next. And you won't discover your purpose by numbing your discomfort every time it surfaces. Growth hurts. It requires patience. It asks you to delay pleasure today for something greater tomorrow. That's what real maturity looks like. Saying no to what pulls you off course even when no one else is watching. It's working in silence. It's showing up on the days you don't feel like it. It's choosing to be bored, even uncomfortable, because you know you're building something bigger than the moment. And here's something we don't talk about enough. Time doesn't wait. You don't get back the years you spent distracted. You don't recover the focus you gave away to every notification, every meaningless conversation, every impulsive decision. Time is brutal. It doesn't care about your excuses, but it does reward discipline quietly, consistently, powerfully. So here's the real question. Are you living like someone who's building a future or just surviving the present? Because when you finally understand that every small choice is a brick in the foundation of your life, you'll stop reaching for comfort and start aiming for greatness. And the woman who can do that, she doesn't just look powerful, she is. Let's talk about something that's uncomfortable but necessary. What happens when a woman builds her entire identity around how she looks? In today's world, we're constantly told that beauty is power. And on the surface, that's not entirely wrong. Beauty can open doors, it can attract attention. It can make life feel easier for a while. But here's the catch: beauty is a fading asset. No matter how flawless your skin is, no matter how perfectly you dress or how well you preserve your youth, time doesn't ask for permission. Gravity doesn't negotiate. The culture that once praised you for being pretty, it moves on quickly. It finds someone younger, someone newer, someone shinier. And if your entire identity is wrapped up in your appearance, if that's all you've developed, all you've relied on, you'll find yourself feeling lost. Insecure, maybe even invisible, because here's the truth. When you spend years investing in how you look but never who you are, you eventually run out of things to offer. You may have attention, but do you have depth? Do you have wisdom? Do you have anything inside you that time can't take away? It's a painful trap, and sadly, it's one many women fall into, not because they're vain, but because the world trained them to. From a young age, girls are told, be beautiful, be desirable, be liked. And somewhere along the way, that message drowns out the more important ones. Be intelligent, be capable, be resilient, be useful. Think about it. How many compliments do women hear in a lifetime about their looks compared to their insight, their kindness, their leadership? The imbalance is real, and it creates a silent pressure to stay young, stay perfect, stay appealing, even if it comes at the cost of emotional growth or personal purpose. But the women who age with confidence, they've built something deeper. They've developed competence. They've built character. They've sharpened their minds and cultivated values. And because of that, their presence doesn't fade, it deepens. They don't panic when they're no longer the most beautiful woman in the room because they know they still have something meaningful to offer. Ask yourself this: if your beauty were taken away tomorrow, what would remain? Would you still feel worthy? Would you still feel powerful? Because real security doesn't come from a mirror, it comes from within. It comes from knowing who you are when no one's watching. From being someone who adds value, not just someone who turns heads. And make no mistake, this isn't about shaming beauty. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel attractive or taking care of yourself, but beauty should be a gift, not a crutch. It should be one part of who you are, not the only part. So, if you want to build a life that lasts, start investing in the parts of you that time can't touch. That's where your real power is, and no one can take that away from you. Let's clear up one of the biggest misconceptions about what it means to be a strong woman. Somewhere along the way, we started confusing loudness with power, as if yelling in a room, raising your voice, or dominating every conversation is the same thing as being respected. But here's the truth: volume isn't strength. It's often the mask we wear when we feel powerless on the inside. Think about the last time someone tried to make a point by shouting over everyone else. Did you truly feel inspired by them? Did their words carry wisdom or just noise? More often than not, what we're seeing in those moments isn't confidence, it's emotional reactivity dressed up as boldness. Real strength, it's quiet, it's grounded, it doesn't need to scream to be heard. Because it speaks from a place of inner certainty. It's the kind of presence that commands attention not by force, but by clarity. When someone has taken the time to think deeply, to examine their beliefs, and to speak with intention, they don't need theatrics. Their words land because they are anchored in something solid. And yet many women have been taught, directly or indirectly, that in order to be taken seriously, they have to be louder, tougher, more aggressive. They've been told, don't let them talk over you or take up space, demand it. And while self-advocacy is absolutely important, yelling your way through life isn't power, it's a performance. One that often leaves you drained, misunderstood, and isolated. Because here's what most people won't say: people might listen to loudness in the moment, but they don't follow it long term. What they follow is wisdom. What they respect is consistency. What they trust is someone who can stay calm when everything else around them is chaos. That's the woman who has real influence. She doesn't need to dominate the room, she grounds it. She doesn't seek to overpower people, she invites them into better thinking. And when she speaks, it's not to prove a point, it's to offer truth. Ask yourself this: do I raise my voice when I feel unseen, or do I speak with clarity regardless of who's watching? Do I confuse intensity with impact? Do I think being feared is the same as being respected? Because here's the reality: respect doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from coherence, from the ability to communicate hard truths without burning bridges, from the willingness to listen as much as you speak, from mastering yourself before trying to influence others. The strongest women aren't the loudest, they're the most composed. They've done the inner work, they don't need to shout to make a point. Their very presence speaks for them. So the next time you feel the urge to yell to be heard, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, am I reacting or am I responding from strength? Because true power isn't about raising your voice, it's about raising your standard of communication. That's the kind of strength that lasts, and that's the kind of strength the world needs more of. Let's talk about a pattern that's more common than most people realize, but far more destructive than they admit. It's the addiction to chaos. There's a kind of woman, maybe you've met her. Maybe you've been her, who always seems to be in the middle of some kind of emotional storm. There's always drama, a crisis, a roller coaster relationship that's either intensely loving or explosively toxic. And when you ask her about it, she'll say things like, we're just passionate, or it's complicated, or at least I'm not settling. But if you peel back the surface, what's really happening isn't passion, it's unresolved trauma. It's a nervous system that's been trained to associate unpredictability with love. If you grew up around instability, then chaos can feel familiar. And familiarity, for better or worse, often feels like safety. That's how the cycle begins. Peace feels boring, stillness feels suspicious. Healthy love, the kind that's calm and consistent, doesn't spark anything inside you because your body's waiting for the drop, the fight, the pain. And when it doesn't come, you wonder if something's wrong. So what happens? You chase the chaos. You get involved with people who are unavailable, disrespectful, or emotionally unstable. You mistake volatility for chemistry. You confuse emotional highs and lows with depth. And worst of all, you start believing that your value is tied to how much you can endure. You wear suffering like a badge of honor. You call yourself loyal for staying through dysfunction. You romanticize pain, thinking that being the ride or die means you're strong. But let's be honest, staying in chaos isn't strength. It's survival mode, and living in survival mode for years doesn't make you powerful. It makes you exhausted. Here's the truth most people avoid. If there's always chaos around you, it might be time to ask if some of it is coming from within you. Because at a certain point, chaos isn't just something happening to you, it becomes something you're subconsciously choosing. Why? Because it gives you a role, it gives you something to fix, someone to save, an identity to hold on when you feel empty. But that identity comes at a cost. It burns your peace, it delays your healing, and eventually, it becomes the reason you can't move forward. So ask yourself, am I addicted to chaos because it feels like love? Do I seek out drama because it feels familiar? Am I avoiding peace because peace forces me to face myself? Because real love, real stability won't come with fireworks. It will come with grounding, with clarity, with presence. And if that scares you more than the next emotional explosion, that's not a sign you're too intense. It's a sign you're not healed yet. You are not here to prove your worth through pain. You don't have to earn love by surviving damage. You are allowed to choose peace. In fact, you were built for it. But first, you have to let go of the fire you keep dancing in. Let's talk about something that keeps far too many women stuck and they don't even realize it's happening. It's the habit of blaming everyone else for everything that goes wrong in life. It's easy to spot when someone's doing it out loud, blaming the boss, the ex, the family, the world. But the real danger isn't just in what's said, it's in what's believed. When you believe deep down that every disappointment in your life is someone else's fault, you give away your power. And here's the tricky part, it can feel incredibly righteous. It feels like truth, like clarity, like protection. But in reality, it's avoidance, it's self-deception. Because if it's always them, then you never have to look at you never have to change, and that might feel safer in the short term, but it's a guaranteed way to stay small. We all know someone like this. Every relationship ends because they were a narcissist. Every job falls apart because the boss was toxic. Every opportunity missed was because someone else sabotaged it. And sure, maybe some of that is true, but when it becomes every time, it's no longer a coincidence, it's a pattern. And what makes this pattern even more dangerous is the echo chamber that surrounds it. Friends who mean well keep validating the story. You did nothing wrong, you're the victim, they didn't deserve you. It feels good to hear that. It feels comforting, but if you surround yourself only with people who protect your ego, you'll never grow. You'll mistake sympathy for healing. You'll confuse support with stagnation. Here's the hard truth. You can't heal in an environment that only tells you what you want to hear. Blame gives you a momentary high. It lets you feel morally superior. It shields you from shame, but it also steals your future. Because growth only starts when you say, okay, maybe I had a role in this too. Not to take on blame that doesn't belong to you, but to take back the steering wheel. And that's the key. Responsibility doesn't mean self-blame. It doesn't mean you caused all the pain, but it does mean recognizing where you reacted instead of responded, where you ignored red flags, where you stayed too long, where you settled when you knew better. That's not weakness, that's power. That's where change begins. Let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you stopped pointing fingers and started asking better questions? Questions like, what part of this was mine to own? Or what lesson was I supposed to learn here? Because once you shift from blame to ownership, everything changes. Your relationships deepen, your confidence grows, your path becomes clearer. You're no longer at the mercy of the world, you're creating your place in it. So no, it's not easy, but it is freeing. The moment you stop blaming others is the moment you reclaim your strength, and that's where real transformation begins. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves, and we don't even know we're doing it. It's the belief that every feeling we have is truth, that every emotion is a signal we must follow, that every desire we feel is somehow wise and valid simply because we felt it. Now, emotions are important. They can guide us, reveal things, even protect us. But when we stop questioning them, when we treat every gut reaction as gospel, we set ourselves up for chaos, because emotions aren't always wise, they're reactive. They can be distorted by fear, by ego, by old wounds we've never healed. And yet we live in a culture that encourages this exact behavior. Follow your heart, trust your instincts. If it feels right, it is right. But what if your instincts are shaped by trauma? What if your heart is still bleeding from things you've never processed? What if what feels right is actually just familiar pain dressed up as comfort? You see, when we never stop to examine what we feel, we give our emotions the driver's seat, and let's be honest, they are terrible drivers. One minute we're inspired, the next we're enraged. We're up, we're down, we're convinced we're right just because we're feeling it strongly. But conviction isn't the same as clarity. That's why silence and structure matter. But here's the catch, they're uncomfortable. Sitting in silence forces you to confront the why behind what you feel. Structure demands discipline. It asks you to pause before you react, to reflect before you respond. And that kind of self-honesty, it's rare, but it's powerful. Many people avoid that inner stillness. It's too quiet, too revealing, because when you're alone with your thoughts, you can't escape your own patterns. That's when you realize some of your most intense feelings weren't truth, they were just unhealed triggers. Let me ask you this. Have you ever stayed in a relationship, fought a battle, or made a life-altering decision simply because it felt right in the moment, only to regret it later? That's the cost of living by unfiltered emotion. You end up dancing in storms that were never meant to be weathered, storms you were supposed to walk away from. Not every fight is worth having. Not every passion is meant to be pursued. Not every fear is a warning. Sometimes it's just a ghost of your past whispering in your ear. So what's the alternative? It's learning to create space between what you feel and what you do. It's developing emotional maturity, not to suppress your feelings, but to examine them, to ask, where is this coming from? Is this true, or is it just loud? Because when you learn to sit with your emotions without instantly obeying them, you gain something rare, wisdom. And that's when you stop being ruled by your reactions and start becoming someone who chooses with clarity, not chaos. Your feelings matter, but they're not the whole story. You are more than what you feel. You are what you choose to do with what you feel, and that is real strength. Let's talk about something that doesn't always get the spotlight, but quietly shapes the entire course of your life. It's called emotional maturity. Not the kind that comes with age, not automatically anyway, but the kind you have to build on purpose. The kind that requires real work. And unfortunately, a lot of women today are taught to skip that work entirely. Instead of developing self-discipline, they're taught to seek self-expression. Instead of cultivating resilience, they're told to chase validation. And instead of sharpening their thinking, they're encouraged to build their image. But here's the problem. Without emotional maturity, everything else starts to collapse. You see it everywhere, women who confuse being seen with being valued. Women who measure their worth by how many followers they have, how many compliments they get, how many heads they turn when they walk into a room. And listen, we all want to be appreciated. That's human. But when you chase approval instead of purpose, you end up performing your way through life instead of building one. And it gets exhausting. Why? Because there's never enough validation. There's always someone more popular, more admired, more together on the outside. When your worth is tied to social metrics, your self-esteem becomes fragile. One negative comment, one moment without attention, and suddenly you're spiraling. That's what happens when you build your identity on sand instead of stone. Emotional maturity is the stone. It's the ability to sit with discomfort without lashing out. It's the discipline to keep showing up when no one is clapping for you. It's knowing how to respond to life with wisdom instead of simply reacting from pain. And perhaps most importantly, it's the decision to stop being surface level, to stop chasing praise and start becoming useful, because usefulness is what lasts. The woman who knows how to think clearly, how to listen well, how to solve problems and stay grounded under pressure. She's the one people turn to when it really counts. Not just because she's impressive, but because she's dependable, steady, trustworthy. Here's the hard truth. If you don't cultivate competence, you will always have to compensate with appearance or performance. But those things fade. Real value, deep, lasting value comes from who you are on the inside. And that can't be faked. Not with a filter, not with a hashtag. Not even with a great personality. It has to be earned through effort, through humility, through the uncomfortable but necessary process of growth. So ask yourself, am I becoming someone who can carry something meaningful, or am I just trying to be liked? Because long-term success, real success, doesn't care how charming you are. It's built on clarity, stability, and insight, and those aren't given to you. You have to grow them. You don't need to be perfect. But you do need to be intentional. Emotional maturity is the foundation for everything you want to build. Without it, all you'll have are moments. With it, you'll have momentum. Let's talk about a habit that quietly kills growth, one that disguises itself as strength but actually builds walls instead of wisdom. It's the habit of living in constant defensiveness. You know the pattern. Every piece of feedback feels like an attack. Every challenge to your thinking feels like a personal insult. The moment someone offers a different perspective, your guard goes up, your voice rises, and the goal becomes winning, not understanding. This isn't strength, it's fear in disguise. And yet it's a pattern many women fall into, not because they're weak, but because they've been hurt. Somewhere along the way, someone made them feel small, unheard, dismissed. So now they're determined to never feel that way again. The armor goes on. The walls go up, the mantra becomes, no one's going to tell me who I am. But here's the problem with that mindset. When you shut out criticism, you also shut out clarity. When you view accountability as an attack, you rob yourself of the very thing that could make you better. Growth requires refinement, and refinement requires friction. Let me put it another way, being offended is easy, being curious is harder, but curiosity is where wisdom begins. It's the moment you say, what if there's truth in this, even if it stings a little? It's the courage to ask, what part of me doesn't want to hear this, and why? Living in constant defensiveness keeps you in a cycle of ego protection. You become more interested in being right than in becoming better. You spend your energy proving yourself instead of improving yourself. And the tragedy, you start mistaking noise for power. Because the louder you get, the more it seems like you're strong. But volume isn't conviction, and outrage isn't truth. Eventually, people stop engaging with you, not because you're intimidating, but because it's exhausting. You push away the very conversations that could elevate you. You surround yourself only with those who agree with you, who never challenge you, and without realizing it, you stop evolving. So let me ask you, when was the last time you allowed someone to correct you and you actually welcomed it? When was the last time you chose understanding over reaction? When was the last time you paused before defending yourself and asked, what can I learn here? That's not weakness, that's strength, that's emotional intelligence. And in a world where outrage is currency, where the loudest voice often drowns out the wisest one, choosing to stay open, to stay teachable is a radical act. You don't need to defend yourself from every opinion. You don't need to have the last word, and you don't have to be right all the time to be worthy of respect. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say, you know what, I hadn't thought of it that way. Let me sit with that, because real strength isn't found in shutting people down. It's found in being grounded enough to let the truth in, even when it challenges you. That's the kind of woman who keeps rising. So let's come back to the heart of it all. If you've made it this far, you already know this video wasn't about judgment. It wasn't about labeling or shaming women. It was about something far more important, awareness. Because awareness is the first crack in the shell. The first sign that something inside you is ready to shift. The truth is, real transformation doesn't come from outrage. It doesn't come from scrolling through motivational quotes or repeating affirmations in the mirror. It comes from something deeper, something quieter, something harder. It comes from humility. The humility to say, maybe I don't have it all figured out. The humility to admit, maybe I've been living on autopilot, reacting instead of responding, surviving instead of truly living. That kind of honesty, it takes courage. It's not flashy, but it's powerful. It also takes responsibility, not the kind that weighs you down with guilt, but the kind that sets you free. The kind that says, maybe I didn't start the fire, but I've been throwing gasoline on it for years, and now I'm done. Because here's the thing, many women, without realizing it, have built their lives around trauma, around chaos, around dysfunction that was never theirs to carry, but that became familiar. And culture often celebrates that. It calls it strength. She's been through hell and still standing, we say, but we never ask, should she still be there? Is enduring pain really the same as healing from it? There's a quiet kind of power that isn't celebrated enough. The power to walk away from what no longer serves you. The power to build something stable instead of staying addicted to what's dramatic. The power to stop performing and start becoming. True strength doesn't shout. It doesn't need an audience. Woman who takes a hard look at herself, not to criticize but to refine, who says, I don't want to be right all the time, I want to be better. Who chooses self-mastery over self-image, peace over performance. That's where growth lives, in the daily decisions no one sees, in the quiet discipline to choose clarity over chaos, in the choice to take ownership not of everything that's happened to you but of how you move forward from here. So what now? Now you decide. Do you keep telling the same story, or do you rewrite it? Do you keep reacting, or do you begin responding with intention? Do you keep blaming, or do you start building? Freedom doesn't come from being loud. It doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being true to yourself, to your values, to what you know deep down is possible for your life. So maybe today's the day you stop asking, who made this mess, and start asking, what can I build from here? Because once a woman stops looking for someone to save her and starts saving herself, that's when everything changes.